you to stand down.
Before 1970, we had one form of scrambling aircraft, and it was immediate, bang, bang, bang. Then in the 1970s, we had some hijackings come into our civil airspace, and that wasn't a quick response. What we did in that is we didn't want the hijackers to know that we were there. So we didn't rush the fighters off the ground, and we kind of snuck them up behind the aircraft. So we put a second protocol in, and the reason that the hijacking protocol is slow is because you had to get Pentagon approval before you could release your fighters. Those two type of protocols lasted until June 1st, 2001. 3 months before 9/11. In June of 2001, Rumsfeld and the Pentagon and the military changed the procedures, and instead of having two protocols, one fast, one slow, they went to one protocol, slow. If we had reacted to the in-flight emergency immediately, the fighters would have been up and on the way, and those aircraft would never, ever have reached their targets. But when the center controllers came to notifying the military, okay, because they had only one protocol to work with, that protocol went through the Pentagon. Guess what? Guess who didn't answer the phone? Sorry, it was the Pentagon. Here's an analogy that I can give that would help out the common person here. What Rumsfeld did is the fire call comes into the fire station, but before the fire truck gets a chance to leave, it has to call the mayor of the city to get approval for that departure. And what if the mayor is out for breakfast or he's sleeping late and he doesn't answer the phone?
Look carefully at this footage, shot just a few minutes after the attack on the Pentagon. Notice the man that is helping to carry a casualty. It is the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. What is he doing here when, as head of the defense of the whole nation, and whilst the United States is still under attack, he is helping tend to the wounded? Why is he not at his command post?
The phone calls went to the Pentagon. It went through the military, and the military was sitting there saying, oh, "Don't answer, don't answer that phone, whatever it might be." Now, how would you like your fire department to sit there and say, "Well, I'm sorry, we can't come and put your house out and save your lives because the mayor didn't say so"? And on 9/12. They changed the protocols again back to the first protocol, which was the fast scrambles, and that's what it is today. So the way that Rumsfeld's Pentagon managed this whole thing is they switched gears, okay? They switched out of having two fast and slow into slow, okay? And then they said, oh, we're bad, 9/12, let's go fast again.
When the United States was attacked without warning at Pearl Harbor, after 8 inquiries, General Walter Short, commander of the Army for the Defense of Hawaii, and Admiral Husband Kimmel, commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, were both charged with negligence and summarily dismissed. But after the 9/11 catastrophe, nobody, neither the Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, nor the head of civil aviation, nor that of air defense, was either punished or removed from office.
On September 10th, Brigadier General W. Montague Winfield asked Junior Officer Captain Charles Leidig to temporarily replace him as Director of Operations at the Pentagon Command Center from 8:30 a.m. on September 11th. Later that day, after Flight 93 was reported crashed, Winfield resumed control. Captain Leidig had only just completed a course qualifying him to run the command center. On September the 11th, Brigadier General David F. Worley Jr. was commander of the Andrews Air Force Base, the nearest one to the Pentagon. September the 11th, Richard B. Myers, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in the absence of Chairman Shelton, was the temporary head of all U.S. armed forces. On the 14th of September, after only 3 days of investigations, the FBI announces it knows everything about the hijackers of the flights.
We have, in the last 24 hours, taken the manifests and used those as an evidentiary base, and have talked to many of the families of the victims, and have successfully, I believe, identified many of the hijackers on each of the 4 flights that went down.
Let's look at the Lockerbie case. It took 2 years to bring indictments in that case. 2 years. In this case, in only 3 days, the FBI provided the names of all the hijackers without providing any evidence that they were actually on the flights. On the 12th of September, the Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Ashcroft, declares to the whole world that the passport of one of the hijackers had been found, a few blocks away from the ruins of Ground Zero. Even though they had said that everything inside the towers had been burnt up or had been reduced to a fine dust. So, the steel was molten, but paper survived? Who were these hijackers? The official story states that 15 out of the 19 came from Saudi Arabia, that they were trained in Afghanistan, and that they were Islamic fundamentalists, fanatical Muslims.
Al-Qaeda is supposed to be a Salafist network, you know, and Salafism is a very, very Puritan strain of Islam that suggests that we need to follow very closely, to the letter, the activities of the Prophet Muhammad. So, were these people Islamic fundamentalists? The evidence would suggest no. Muhammad Atta was basically not an Islamic fundamentalist.
But there was always drinking, always drinking. If it wasn't wine, it was beer or liquor or whatever. There was always drinking, always. And they had massive supplies of cocaine. Muhammad and all these people that he was with, they were drunk and stoned out of their freaking mind.
The identikits of the hijackers supplied by the FBI are truly bizarre. Each identikit corresponds to a number of persons. These persons are very different. They have different attitudes and different biographies. They live in different places, sometimes at the same moment.
When you speak of Muhammad Atta, what Muhammad Atta? Is it the Muhammad Atta who was in Hamburg, Germany, being run by German intelligence? Is it that Muhammad Atta? Is it the Muhammad Atta who appears in Venice, Florida, which is a major locus for the National Security Agency, who's supposedly training at a little flight school for a little single and dual engine Cessna aircraft, and who's rooming with a man named Charlie Voss, who was a CIA pilot who ran guns into Nicaragua and cocaine out for the Central Intelligence Agency? Is it that Muhammad Atta? Is it the Muhammad Atta who spoke to his father on the 12th of September, as Newsweek reported in an interview with his father in Cairo? Is it that Muhammad Atta? Is it the Muhammad Atta who appears in a bar called Shuckham's Bar in Hollywood, Florida, doing lines of cocaine and drunk on Stolichnaya vodka, and who, when asked to pay his bill, says, I work for United States Airlines. You think I can't pay my bill? And then he says, fuck God.
This is not the behavior of an Islamic fanatic who is about to commit a suicide martyrdom operation.
Prima che l'Atta, che risiede ad Amburgo in Germania,
according to the official version, before Atta, who lived in Hamburg, Germany, moved to the United States, his American namesake was visiting an office of the Department of Agriculture, where he spoke to an employee to request a loan of $650,000. With this loan, he wanted to rent a small aeroplane and attach a large tank of chemicals to it. Upon the refusal of the woman to give him the loan, he began to threaten her, saying he would cut her throat. Then he told her he was an American Airlines pilot. He threw a bundle of banknotes onto the desk and asked for information about the security systems of the Twin Towers. He even tried to buy a poster of the Pentagon that was on the wall of the office. And then he finally went away. Well now, is this the typical behavior of a member of a secret sleeper cell? Isn't it more like the behavior of someone who is trying to be remembered?
This is not the behavior of an Islamic fanatic who is about to commit a suicide martyrdom.
Secondo la versione ufficiale,
the official version states that Al-Omari and Atta leave Florida heading for Boston. This is according to plan, since that is where the two aeroplanes due to be hijacked will depart. But they don't stop when they get to Boston, they continue to Maine. It is the afternoon of September the 10th. The next day will be the most important day in the two men's lives, a day on which they cannot make any mistakes. But what do? They go on a trip to Portland. They spend the night there and they attract attention to themselves with their noisy revelry. They also pay with credit cards in their names. They do everything they can to leave traces of their presence there. Next morning at 6 a.m., they fly from Maine to Boston. The plane that they are going to hijack takes off only half an hour after their flight lands. This is a very tight time window, potentially putting the whole plan in jeopardy. The circumstances surrounding the departure from Portland to Boston is very important, both in terms of the investigation and in shaping public opinion. It is there that the airport's CCTV cameras record the video in which we see the faces of Atta and Al-Omari. This video has been shown hundreds of times on television as evidence of the two terrorists boarding the aeroplane they are about to hijack. It's not true. That video shows them embarking at Portland. There is no evidence of the presence of these hijackers. It is simply something that the FBI tells us, without any proof. There is no proof. There is no way to prove the presence of any one of these patsies, these scapegoats on the planes. None at all. On September the 16th, one of the alleged hijackers of Flight 11, Abdel Aziz Al-Omari, went to the Jeddah consulate to protest his innocence to US officers. Al-Omari, a pilot from Saudi Airlines, receives an official apology from the American officers in Riyadh. Then, on the 22nd of September, Walid al-Shahiri announces he is still alive. He too is supposed to have hijacked Flight 11. From his house in Casablanca, Morocco, the impertinent al-Shahiri declares his innocence. The following day, the 23rd of September, the Daily Telegraph publishes the protestations of innocence of Saeed al-Ghamdi and Ahmed al-Nami, both of them still alive and well, and pilots for Saudi Arabian Airlines. On the 27th of September, CBS tracks down Salem al-Hazbi. According to the FBI, he was dead after Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. But curiously, he persists in hanging around alive in Saudi Arabia, where he works in an oil refinery. Have the names of Al-Omari, Al-Shahiri, Al-Ghamdi, Al-Nami, and Al-Hazbi been deleted from the list of the hijackers, with many apologies? No. 6 years later, these 19 people are accused as being the sole perpetrators of the terror attack.
Establish the identities of the perpetrators, and you have a serious problem in your criminal inquiry. And raising this question is not about raising conspiracy theory. It's really just about criticizing the absolutely ridiculous nature of the criminal inquiry and the fact that they have no idea who carried out these attacks. Then the fundamental question in a criminal inquiry is who did it?
They have this evil organization. They have the leader of this evil organization, bin Laden. They have a secret network in the caves of Afghanistan. It could be the screenplay of a James Bond movie.
The first bin Laden videotape that was leaked and that was used by the media to suggest that Osama bin Laden has claimed responsibility. This was a very problematic videotape. There was an analysis that found that it was completely fraudulent. There were a number of issues. There were basic issues such as, for example, Osama bin Laden was wearing a gold ring. Now, in Islamic fiqh, Islamic law, a man is not allowed to wear gold. So why is the head of one of the most militant Salafist movements wearing a gold ring? Doesn't make sense.
The video in question, that was found in Afghanistan in very doubtful circumstances by American soldiers in a house that was supposed to have been abandoned by Al-Qaeda, has been questioned for various reasons. For example, a German TV network gave an alternative translation. It is completely different from the one given by the American investigators. They are not apparently claiming a role in the 11th of September attacks, but they are simply talking about what happened on September the 11th. Many of the other videos of Osama bin Laden have in fact a person speaking and an audio track that does not correspond, or that corresponds very little, to what his lips are actually saying.
People often ask me, how can you doubt the official version if Osama bin Laden himself appeared several times on television to say, I did it? So I will tell you a little story. However, I can only tell you this story as I am unable to show you anything. We cannot show the images we do have because the owners of this material refuse permission for you to see them. In the summer of 2005, the Commission of the European Parliament for Security and Defence, of which I am a member, was invited to a special screening created by the Washington Center for Strategic Studies. We were asked to watch a film which depicted what would happen in Europe if Brussels was hit by a nuclear bomb. 50,000 deaths, 100,000 injured. The reactions of various European governments. Suddenly, footage of Osama bin Laden claiming responsibility for a nuclear attack on NATO headquarters comes on screen. All members of the parliament, myself included, were rendered speechless. American experts from the Center for Strategic Studies were on hand to explain the action on screen. Then a parliamentarian finally said, "Today, we were shown a convincing demonstration of how Osama bin Laden's image can be completely manipulated."
Many took the place of bin Laden's terrorist organization, Al-Qaeda.
All the Osamas we have seen over the years may never have existed. just as a nuclear attack on NATO headquarters in Brussels has never taken place. Now they're denying us use of these images. No matter, we will go on without them. But people, have a look yourselves. This is an Osama bin Laden from the 7th of September of 2007. Compare him with the other Osamas we have seen in the last few years. Do you believe it is possible that he is getting younger over time? Do you believe it is possible that his beard is darker than before? Do you believe it possible that his nose has grown? We don't need analysis. A child can understand that they are two different people, but these people are being introduced to us as if they were the same person. And this story has been told to us now for over 6 years. Did bin Laden organize the attacks of September the 11th? And if so, did he do it alone or with someone else? At this point, we must explain the origins of Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda è stata fondata.
Bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda in 1989 at the end of the war between the Soviet Union and Muslim guerrillas in Afghanistan.
E guerriglieri islamici in Afghanistan.
It was after that war and not for that war. So who or what were all those Muslim guerrillas supposed to fight?
What did Al-Qaeda mean at that time? And this is very interesting. We'd have to go to Robin Cook, the late Foreign Secretary. In the Guardian article, he confirmed that Al-Qaeda was a term that was invented by the CIA, and it had been invented to designate a database of mujahideen that were recruited and trained by the CIA. And he's right, because the Arabic word for database, you just have to add this word. It's Al-Qaeda Ma'lumat. Al-Qaeda means the base, and Ma'lumat means data. Together it means database.
Al-Qaeda is fake. Al-Qaeda is not an organization. Al-Qaeda is only a label. There is no organization like Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is a list of participants in the Afghanistan war of the 80s. Al-Qaeda is nothing. It is only a puppet blown up by the Western propaganda to show the public the big evil.
I was chief of the visa section at the American Consulate General in Jeddah between September 1987 and March 1989. During my period there, I was involved in what turned out to be a Visas for Terrorists program, with people coming to the consulate recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency and its asset Osama bin Laden, and sent to America, either for instruction in how to be good terrorists, or for rewards, or for debriefings on what they've been doing in Afghanistan. I assume it was simply on how to blow things up, shoot things down, and overthrow governments.
After the Cold War, their connections with Al-Qaeda proliferated, multiplied. Al-Qaeda is being controlled in various ways, directly and indirectly. Systematically, Al-Qaeda has been used in various theaters of conflict. So from 1992 to 95, you look at the Bosnian conflict.
I believe that the American government was working with various Arab and Muslim organizations, whether it was Al-Qaeda or whether it was people that became Al-Qaeda, to be trained, to be armed, and to be sent to the Balkans to overthrow Slobodan Milosevic and anybody allied with him.
That kind of policy continued in the Balkans all the way up to post-2001.
American Secret Services, who only delivered weapons during the war, after the war also engaged the jobless mujahideen on their own payroll. That is a proven fact. There are a lot of testimonies of mujahideen before German courts. They were hired by subcontractors of the Pentagon, namely the private contractor MPRI, Military Professional Resources Incorporated. MPRI is formally private, but in fact it's kind of secret device of the US Army. They have more 4-star general under contract than the Pentagon itself. If the Pentagon wants to do some dirty job and thinks they cannot get the money and they cannot get the approval of the US Congress, they give the job to this private company. At the beginning of summer 1999, MPRI brought this Bosnian Mujahideen back to the Balkans, especially into Kosovo, to help the Kosovo terrorist army KLA. They engaged them, they paid them monthly. A lot of Bosnian Mujahideen were involved in the big terrorist attacks of the last 5 years. So, speaking about 9/11, 5 of 7 Arabs in the center of the 9/11 plot were former Mujahideen fighters in Bosnia. 5 of 7. Nobody speaks about it.
What is required for you to get a visa approved to enter the United States? The type of information you have to supply is extremely detailed. But a high-ranking official in the US consulate of Jeddah, Michael Springman, revealed the fact that in that office, many CIA agents were working undercover and that the office was issuing too many visas far too easily to some very suspicious people.
I was told by a really good contact, businessman outside the American consulate, that if I had sent one word to the State Department inspection team investigating what was going on in the consulate, I would be fired summarily.
Well, that office in Jeddah issued many of the 15 visas that were used by the hijackers to enter the United States. None of the 15 applications conformed to US visa regulations. For example, under the heading Destination, many of them wrote Hotel, New York or California, and in one case, just no.
And so, it was common practice to help the terrorists of Al-Qaeda to enter the United States. They came to be trained, and this went on for years and years. The same thing happened with the hijackers of September the 11th.
The terrorists, 6 of the terrorists, including Mohammed Atta, trained at U.S. military facilities. Okay? Mohammed Atta went to International Officer School at Maxwell Air Force Base.
Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, Brooks Air Force Base in Texas. Their contact address, the Pensacola Naval Station in Florida, the Defense Language Institute of the Defense Intelligence Agency in Monterey, California. The hands of intelligence are all over these people.
So, to sum up, the main hijackers trained and fought in ex-Yugoslavia, where they were paid by a company of mercenaries that was connected to the Pentagon. Thanks to the CIA, they got entry visas to the United States. Once they were in America, they did everything they could to be recognized and to attract attention to themselves, since they were sure of their impunity. They trained in American military bases and went to flight schools, although they didn't learn to fly.
All the testimony about these lessons indicate that these men were completely incapable of maneuvering even small aeroplanes. For example, Mohammed Atta hired an aeroplane from a flight school, but he was not even able to take off. So he left it there on the runway and went away. Regarding 2 other pilots, their instructor, Rick Grazer, said to investigators and the press that he could not understand how these 2 could have maneuvered an aeroplane.
potuto manovrare un...
His exact words were that it was like Dumb and Dumber in a plane.
Due funzionari dell'FBI, Colleen Rowley.
Two FBI agents, Colleen Rowley in Minneapolis in the state of Minnesota, and another who was in Phoenix in Arizona, sent messages to the FBI's headquarters in Washington, saying, more or less, watch out. There are many Arabs here who have enrolled in flight schools.
The first person in the flight school that called the FBI took a big risk, because at the time what he was doing was reporting about a customer, a paying customer. And those flight schools depended upon, to a certain extent, foreign pilots. And so now he's reporting about a paying customer. You know, this person is very suspicious. A list of facts that pointed to Moussaoui being a terrorist. He wanted to learn to fly but not take off and land. I have never seen such a unusual person seeking flight instruction.
Colleen
Rowley immediately informed her superiors in Washington, but nothing happened. Their investigations were obstructed.
There were no warning signs that I'm aware of that would indicate this type of operation in the country.
I wrote a memo in May of 2002, 12, 13-page memo, is the Joint Intelligence Committee report. And both of those were, I hope, you know, basically what my memo did was expose that this was not true, that 9/11 could not have been prevented. The FBI's acting director, a guy by the name of Picard, during the summer of 9/11, he attempted to brief Attorney General Ashcroft about terrorism a couple of times. And the first time, Ashcroft showed little interest in terrorism. In fact, Ashcroft ended up ranking terrorism as his lowest priority in August of 2001. At one point, Picard was told by Ashcroft, I don't want to hear any more about terrorism.
After September 11, 2001, when I heard about the planes crashing into the World Trade Towers and into the Pentagon, I said, geez, these were the same people, according to the Los Angeles Times, who had gotten their visas from the American Consulate General at Jeddah. I called the Federal Bureau of Investigation and tell them essentially the basics of the Visas for Terrorists program. I did this. I called and I called and I called. I was passed from one office of the FBI to another and ended up at the Washington field office, and someone there said, we'll get back to you. Well, 6 years later, I'm still waiting.
We received these audio tapes that were obtained 3 months before September 11, 2001, from a different field office, Iranian informant who'd been on FBI's payroll for 10 years, since about 1991, 1992, in April 2001. And in April 2001, this informant told the FBI that on a separate issue, he had obtained information about Al-Qaeda, bin Laden, issuing an attack in the United States that would involve 5 major cities, and it will involve airplanes, and that the attack was going to take place within the next few months. They took the information, they found it important, they filled out forms, they came back to the headquarters, and then they filed it. They gave it to the superiors, right? Nothing happened. 2 months later, they met with the same informant again. And the informant asked, he said, did you do something with that information I gave you, because it came from really reliable sources? And the agent said, yes, we gave it to our superiors. Well, Nothing happened. Nobody followed up on this.
They discovered Ramzi Yousef's computer with the Bojinka plan in 1996 in the Philippines. It talked about taking hijacked planes and running them into the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol, the CIA headquarters, and the Twin Towers. The Pentagon staged an exercise a year before, in October of 2000, at the site with the Arlington County Fire Department to simulate a plane running into the Pentagon and how the fire responders would get there and what they would do. So this was not outside the box or, you know, out in the blue. They not only expected it, they prepared for it.
One of the most frequent declarations made by the Bush administration was that these attacks took us by surprise.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a missile.
And I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
Secondo USA Today, dal 1999.
According to USA Today, in 1999, the American Air Force conducted special exercises 4 times per year in which the hijacking of civil aeroplanes by terrorists was simulated. The selected targets were the Twin Towers and the Pentagon.
Anybody would have
the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Would have predicted.
I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
On the 11th of September 2002, the New York Times wrote, "1 year later, the public knows less about the circumstances of 2,801 deaths at the foot of Manhattan in broad daylight than people in 1912 knew within weeks about the Titanic."
5 years after that article, what happened that day is still a mystery.
My name's Bob McIlvaine. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I lost my son Bobby, who's age 26, on September 11th, 2001. He had just gotten a job at Merrill Lynch. Already. It always hits you blind. And don't worry, I'll get over it. But I mean, anytime you just mention that day, it's like the pain just comes shooting up. And of course, when you keep doing this, it just, you think it gets better, but it just never gets better.
The conclusions that the 9/11 Commission came to have been very disappointing. A lot of evidence has been ignored. Many witnesses were not called to testify. The final report glosses over a great many key issues.
A few days before 9/11, Mohammed Atta received a huge sum of money. About $100,000, money which was delivered by a Pakistani Secret Service officer. And the big scandal is that the 9/11 Commission of the US Congress never interrogated this man and never tried to bring light into the story of this 100,000.
While everybody was doing testimony televised to the whole nation, mine was behind closed door. Now, why would they want that behind closed door? That didn't make any sense. Anyway, I told them exactly the same argument that we have here, that we heard explosions, that people were burned, that prior the building getting hit by the plane, that these people were alive and they were available to be interrogated. And wow, what a surprise. The final report comes out. They didn't even mention my name, doesn't appear anywhere. They didn't call, not even once, any of the witnesses that we gave them. So you have 17 firefighters, you have 22 survivors, and they didn't call not even one of them.
Specifically me as a parent, I have an obligation to find out who murdered my son. The commission gave me nothing. 9/11 commission was not an investigation.
Remember, the entire bin Laden family was on one of the planes later. They'd been collected from all over the United States, and they were whisked out of the country with the speed of light while the Pentagon was still burning.
So they asked Mueller, who authorized these people to leave the country? Well, someone in the State Department. Well, can you tell us who? He said, well, I don't recall. I don't recall. Another instance, General Myers. This is later on in the commission. They asked about Moussaoui. Do you recall getting any information concerning Moussaoui? His answer was, I don't recall. I don't recall. Ashcroft, Attorney General. Picard was the FBI head during the summer. He had testified that they had all these warnings, 71 different warnings about something happening this summer. And Ashcroft sat there and lied. He said, I didn't know these things. I didn't know these warnings. We were paying attention to terrorism.
No warning signs that I'm aware of.
Anybody.
And I don't think the prior government could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
These people lied, and our government protected them. It was obvious they were lying. These people that people were testifying should have gone. Mueller should be in jail. Ashcroft should be in jail. Condoleezza Rice should be in jail.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would try to use airplanes in buildings.
Punish.
Osama bin Laden is the world's
And punish those responsible.
They have this evil organization. They have the leader, bin Laden.
Punish, dead or alive.
They have a secret network in the caves of Afghanistan.
Tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so we can make sure they are no longer operating. These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion.
Obviously, they will never catch bin Laden, because then everybody will think the war on terror is over.
It's hard for Americans to imagine how evil people are who are doing this.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a parent looking for the murder of my son. And you have to be a moron to think that 19 Arabs did it. Again, my dogs know better than that. So that's very important. Put yourself in my shoes and think of your child being murdered. And you've never had an investigation. Well, how would you feel if they refused to investigate the murder of your child?
Sono stato a casa fino alle 3 di mattina.
I was at home until 3 in the morning. Then I got up because I couldn't sleep. I went back there, down there, to try to find someone. Could a fireman or a policeman still be trapped down there? I wanted to find him, even if he was... or a person who worked there, only to give myself a bit of satisfaction.
Sono stato laggiù per 9 giorni a fila.
I was down there searching for 9 days, but I didn't find anyone alive. I went down there for nearly a year and a half. And if I wasn't down there working and searching, I was at funerals. They took my friends from me. They took my job from me. And I really loved that job. And they took my health from me. I do not want people to forget that day.
And the story has to be told. Problem with Americans, it's like a big iceberg. We live at the tip of the iceberg, and we're afraid of the dark truths of our history. And it's getting worse and worse. Well, this is a real dark truth. It will pull the whole iceberg down, but then hopefully it'll rise back up. But we have to learn the truth, or this country isn't worth anything. All that history is lame. And the people should be ashamed of themselves for not seeking the truth.